Hello, students. Today we will discuss Kalidas' poem Is Poetry Always Worthy When It's Old? Kalidas was a renowned Sanskrit poet and dramatist. He lived from the mid 4th to the early 5th century. He is regarded as the greatest person in classic Sanskrit literature. He described great praise of Ujjaini, so it is guessed that he was a resident of Ujjaini. The current legends are that he was a court poet of King Vikramaditya of Ujjaini. His works show his profound acquaintance about court life. He was a Brahmin by caste and was a devout worshipper of Lord Shiva. He described vividly the Himalayan scenes in his works, so it is concluded that he had travelled far and wide throughout the country. The name of Kalidas itself means that he was a servant of the goddess Kali, that is Durga. Kalidas' most famous play is Abhigyanam Shakuntalam. Abhigyan Shakuntalam is a drama composed in the form of poetry. This drama describes the romantic love and adversity of a maiden Shakuntala whom King Dushyanta marries. The king, under the magic effect, forgets his bride, and when the ring which was given by him to her is discovered in the body of a fish and is given to him, he remembers her. Abhigyanam Shakuntalam has been staged in the Western stage several times. So, here Kalidas was a Sanskrit poet, and we have this poem of Kalidas in our syllabus. So, today we will be discussing the poem Is Poetry Always Worthy in detail. Please read the poem. Is poetry always worthy when it's old? This is a very short poem composed by Kalidas, and there are other poets also, Sanskrit poets, whose poems we have to read. For example, Bhabhabhuti is one of the next poets whose poem we will be reading. Now, in this stanza of 4 lines, the poet Kalidas questions whether poetry is always significant when it becomes old. When poetry stands the test of time, that is, when time does not affect the worth of poetry, it signifies that poetry has real and intrinsic worth in it. In the second line of the stanza, the poet Kalidas puts another question whether poetry becomes worthless due to being new. The poet leaves this question to be decided by a sensible reader whether it is true or not. The poet finally says that the foolish persons or the dull readers do not decide it themselves, but leave it to be decided by other persons and tell the decision of it to them. They are unable to decide the worth of poetry, and they depend on critics or other readers to tell them the worth or significance of poetry. So the poet Kalidas puts 2 questions in this stanza of 4 lines. Whether poetry is always worthy when it is old, and whether poetry is worthless because it is new. Kalidas says that a sensible reader himself should decide whether it is true or not. He himself should decide the significance of poetry. Only the foolish readers cannot decide themselves the worth of poetry, and await other readers or critics